Hey there, Fox 35 Storm Team Meteorologist Noah Bergen here with your video update. Today, the tropics, July the 26th of 2024. I hope you've had a great week. We are rapidly progressing through summer, and we are just about to that point of reaching prime hurricane season once again. All right, a quick reminder. Last year, here's all the storms that formed. In red are the ones that came and made landfall. You see, there's only a few. We had Ophelia, Idalia, and then Harold. So a lot of the storms did not make landfall last year in the U.S. or Mexico. Most of them stayed out to sea. That's because the steering currents last year were further east. This year, very different story. That high pressure ridge that sets up shop is way further west. So I think once we're done with this season, we'll see a lot more of those lines that took storms into the United States. Here's where we stand this year so far. Obviously, this very long tracking line and storm, that was Hurricane Beryl, which was a historic storm. And then Alberto and Chris went into eastern Mexico. So we've had those three named storms so far this year, and that leaves us with Debbie up next, followed by Ernesto. And the three names to really keep an eye on in most years, one of or multiple of these will be a big hurricane. The IJK named storms, because obviously those most of the time coincide with the peak season in September or October, depending on the year. That's Isaac, Joyce, and Kirk for this year. All right, so as of tonight from the National Hurricane Center, we do have an outlook area. It's got a 20% chance now of development over the next 7 days. Now remember, this is not a guarantee. It's the percentage to look at. And it goes low, medium, high, and they give percentages when they do this. So slow organization is possible. If something were even going to form, it would be late next week. We're talking about next Friday, next weekend, and then early the week thereafter. And the next name up, as I showed you, is Debbie. And this currently includes parts of Cuba, Puerto Rico, Jamaica, Hispaniola, and then into parts of the Bahamas. So let's take a look out in the Atlantic right now. I've got a couple of things plotted on here for you. The brown indicates the dust. Saharan dust is generally located between about 5 and 15,000 feet. It's not at the ground. It's not up in the jet stream level. It's in the lower to medium part of the atmosphere. And notice all of this brown. There's a ton of Saharan dust out there, which this is the time of the year that it normally occurs, earlier in the summer to midsummer. It generally goes away late summer into the fall. Now notice there are some tropical waves out there. There's one here, and then one still over Africa. But the one we're concerned about that's outlooked over the next 7 days is this one right here. It's kind of on the southern periphery of that dust. Now a couple of things about dust and tropical waves. Generally the dust gets into thunderstorms and it inhibits them from really growing and more forming. That being said, I wanted to dispel some things you may have heard from other weather sources or online or on social media. Dust is not the only reason why things don't form, because often you may hear nothing's forming because of the dust. Well, it's actually probably only about half the recipe. There's something called the MJO, that's the Madden-Julian Oscillation. It tells us where the atmosphere is rising or sinking. Obviously rising air, makes clouds, precip, then down the line, thunderstorms, and in this case over the water, tropical system. Well, right now the MJO is in a phase over the Atlantic where the air is sinking, which prevents thunderstorms from really taking off and therefore getting to the point of producing a tropical system. So we've got that phase of the MJO combined with all of this dust. So those two married together, that is why things have been quiet in the last few weeks, but that's not going to continue. The dust is going to go away. The MJO is going to completely change its phase by next week. So as this tropical wave, you see these thunderstorms here in these brighter colors, as this continues its trek westward closer towards the northern Caribbean, it's going to find itself in an environment that's more favorable. Now, in terms of ocean heat content, what that is the amount of energy in the ocean water for hurricanes. Now, this is not just you stick your finger in the ocean and it's 2 inches of water. This is a complicated meteorological formula that takes into account where in the ocean it is, how deep that warmth is. Is it very shallow warmth, or does that warm layer extend down several feet or even tens of feet, meters and beyond? And it gets calculated, and in this case of our graphics, we spit it out in terms of colors for you. And notice the Caribbean in particular is like, wow, stands out. A tremendous amount of heat content right now for hurricanes. And there's actually an extreme pixel area right around the loop current here in the southeastern Gulf, and then off the east coast of Florida. Very high energy for tropical systems. Now out here it's medium for right now, but that's still well above the average and plenty supportive for a rapidly strengthening tropical system. In terms of the ocean temperatures in the plain sense, above 80. Notice the entire Gulf, the entire Caribbean, all of the Western Atlantic is now above 80. In terms of water, above 85. You can see some getting down closer towards Puerto Rico. More or less both sides of Cuba, the water temperature is now above 85. Right off the coast of Miami and Fort Lauderdale, it's above 85. The entire west coast of Florida, it's in the upper 80s, and a good chunk of the Gulf is now into the upper half of the 80s. Overall, red on this map means it's above average, blue below. This is the ocean anomaly. And notice there's an awful lot of red. There's not a lot of blue. In fact, this is the only little speck of blue there in the west central Atlantic. And this is the main region for storms to develop in. Now, this is a little bit inside baseball, but it's an interesting graphic I wanted to show you. This red line here indicates 2024, the amount of ocean heat content in this red box, which if you can squint and see, that's the MDR, where the majority of storms develop, tropically speaking. It's from the eastern Caribbean, just off the coast of Africa. And notice so far this year, this red line, we've been at record territory. It's been the most amount of heat content in the ocean we've ever recorded. The blue line is the average of all years historically, which notice obviously February, March, the end of winter, it's at its lowest, and then normally it peaks at about October, late September, early October. This faint red line beneath it, that was last year, which actually was the previous record, which for a good chunk of this year, you can see we've well surpassed. This is from Brian McNulty in the University of Miami. And notice right where we are right now, if you go to the right on this chart, we're at the amount of heat content in the ocean for what's normal at about late August or early September. So we're more than a month ahead of schedule for how much energy is laying there in the ocean surface for tropical systems. And that still is the big reason why the season is calling for very high amount of storms. That combined with the developing La Nina, which granted it's not as strong of a La Nina as it looked like it was going to be a few months ago, but still going to transition to La Nina. So today we're right at that white dot. Historically, this is all the named storms and all the hurricanes in red, named storms in yellow. And notice the peak of the season, as most of y'all probably know, is generally about the first week of September. So let's talk a little bit more about this system. Here's the pattern for next week. High pressure anchored over the north central Atlantic. That's going to cause steering flow beneath it from east to west. Remember that chart I showed you at the beginning? Last year, this high was more eastern based in the Atlantic. So that allowed the storms to recurve more, as you saw, away from the United States. This year, this high is further west and bigger, which is going to direct more of the storms into the Gulf, into Mexico, towards Florida or the southeast or even New England, as opposed to them safely recurving away from all land masses out into the open waters of the Atlantic. So there's our tropical wave right now. Again, some showers and storms. A tropical wave is the very beginnings of what could become a tropical system. So here's how I see this playing out as we go forward. For the next several days, it's going to struggle because the MJO is in the wrong phase. There's dust and there's shear. So while it's trekking westward in this brown, it's not going to do anything. It won't even look all that impressive on the satellite. It's not going to do anything. Once it gets maybe to mid next week, or around August 1st in this yellow, the environment could become quite favorable. Now, does that wave survive the trek into this yellow area? That's question number one. Question number two, where does it go once it's in this yellow area I've highlighted? If it goes right over Hispaniola, right over Cuba, there's a lot of mountains, and if a system is weak in trying to get organized, that's going to really put a lid on how strong it can get and how big it can form. So where that wave is tracking once in this area will make a big difference. If, like some models show, it stays north of these islands and then finds itself in the Bahamas, the wind shear will be down, the dust will be down. Yeah, I could see something gather pretty quick and then come into Florida's east coast, follow the edge of this high and go into the Carolinas, or scoot across Florida, then go into the Gulf towards about August 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th time frame. Here's the European model ensemble. So in other words, the European model, which y'all have heard of before, we run it a whole bunch of different times to create an ensemble. Then here's the mean of all of those different versions of the euro. This is the percent likelihood of seeing a tropical system. Notice the colored bar at the top. So this would be 10, here's 20, here's 30, here's 40%. So notice the European model on August 2nd is saying there's almost a coin's flip odds already that a tropical system would be formed somewhere around Puerto Rico, Hispaniola maybe, as far away as the, maybe the Bahamas. And then as we go to August 3rd, 4th, 5th, those probabilities scoot more towards Florida. Notice they come down a little bit, but this blue color here is 10%, this is 20, and then this right here is a 30% chance of a tropical system, and that's August 4th we're looking at right now. But notice it's a pretty large envelope. Clearly you can see, if you're into math and statistics, that means that some of the ensemble members are way out here with the path, some are down into here, but the majority of whatever this is kind of carry it in this green area by August 4th or 5th. Will it just be nothing, not develop at all, go across the mountains, and this is a nothing burger? Yeah, that's possible. May it come north of the islands, it becomes something that strengthens pretty fast? That's also possible. But the bottom line is, at this point, it's nothing to worry about, nothing to cancel vacation plans or a cruise over yet. But the point is, August 2nd through about the 6th and 7th, there's the potential for a system to spin up. If it does, it would be named Debbie, and it would be aimed in a direction of which towards Florida or the southeast U.S. So my advice to you is to stay calm. Rock and roll will get you through this season, but it's a good subtle reminder to have a plan. Make sure you've got your supply stocked up, because at some point this year, Florida is going to deal with some kind of a tropical system. We hope not, but the statistical numbers certainly do point that way. So for right now, thank you all for watching. I'm Storm Team Meteorologist Noah Bergen with Fox 35.